Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 3 p.m. ET, and you have found us here on Crime Time at a special time. We're usually on only at 4 o'clock, but today we're coming on an hour earlier because we have such a fantastic author that I did not want to let her get away just because of time zones. Let me tell you that today we are celebrating the fabulous Gillian McAllister, whose brand new book, Just Another Missing Person, is just out. And you all, thank you. And you all, it is unbelievably good. I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense and the winner of 37 Emmys for investigative reporting. My current book is The House Guest. The trade paperback just went into second printing, not only the hardcover. So that is great. I'm very pleased about that. And thank you. And look what is here. I have just received my advance review copy of One Wrong Word. I think I can make my face do that. My brand new book, which comes out in February. But today we are here to, if I could give a standing ovation on camera, I would do that for the amazing Gillian McAllister, who knew her new Just Another Missing Person, as I said, is just out. It is brilliant and revealing and thought-provoking and heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking, about morality and justice and mother-daughter relationships and professional responsibility and what would cause someone to throw away their entire moral code. What could happen that would make that happen? And that is Just Another Person by Gillian McAllister. It's a thriller, you all. Welcome, Renee, and welcome, Sharon, and welcome. The other Sharon is also here. So nice to see you. And Mia, clued up reader, is here. That's amazing. So wonderful to see you all. Let me read you something, and then I promise I'll let Gillian talk. She's like, yeah, okay, we're just talking. It's a thriller, of course, and so it is impossible to talk about. Hi, Lynn. But we will try. Nancy says, I read Wrong Place, Wrong Time and loved it so much. We will talk about that, Nancy. I took Gillian's much too much time backstage telling her I love that book as well. Anyway, let me tell you what Lisa Jewell says about this book. Lisa Jewell, the queen of us all. Gillian McAllister knocks it out of the park yet again with this exquisitely plotted, seamlessly constructed police drama filled with clever twist after clever twist, gasp out loud reveals, and beautifully realized characters. Just tremendous, says Lisa Jewell. This book, I love how Lisa Jewell talks about reveals, because people always talk about twists, but I think reveals is what you really do. There are things that are known that the reader just doesn't know yet. Can you talk a little bit about the idea of reveals?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've all had the reading experience where you get to the end and either it's a whodunit and you find out who did it, or there's a twist that comes from absolutely nowhere. And I don't really find either of those experiences very satisfying. And what I like to do is kind of lay all the cards out for the reader, and they don't know it's a royal flush until you put them in the right order for them. Do you know what I mean? So I like it to be guessable and have all the information and kind of be quite audacious with that, and then go, here you go. I put it in the right order and look, it's obvious now. It looks obvious, although it wasn't.
Exactly. I think about that as you're giving the reader puzzle pieces, and they're putting together a puzzle that they know what the picture on the puzzle is. And when they get it all finished, you say, look at the other side of the puzzle. And on the other side are the same pieces still connected, but with a completely different meaning. Is this all is it planned for you? Do you know what's going to happen?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I don't think I could do it without a plan at all. The plan does vary, I think, but it varies more in kind of the red herrings and how I get there, and how much sometimes I reveal too much and then I have to take a card back in an edit. But yeah, I don't, like Lisa Jewell herself does not plot, and I just don't know how she does that without tying herself in total knots. That's what would happen to me.
I don't plot either, and it's just how how authors' brains work differently. All of you know, hi Sherry, hi Nancy, hi Deborah is here today as well. This is great. And Kim, yay, love that you're here. If I would do anything for an outline. I would love to have an outline. It would be so lovely, but my brain just doesn't do it.
That's interesting.
Have you, from the beginning, did you outline when you started writing?
I do, yes, but I wouldn't say I'm particularly efficient, because what I actually do is I outline, I write easily an 80,000 word draft, and then I delete it and start again. That is actually my process, which nobody believes and everybody finds very disturbing, but that is what I do.
Okay. So
Yeah. Why is the question
why
on your
that?
lips?
So I know that the literary fiction writer Lauren Groff told me once that she writes her first draft on brown shelf paper, which is taped to the walls of her writing room, like butcher paper.
Wow.
And she just writes it on this butcher paper, writes the whole thing. And then she just takes it all down and throws it away. And then she starts putting sentences on paper.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it is not unlike that, except that I spend at least a month outlining and then I write. But for me, something happens in the writing that can't be achieved in an outline or a synopsis, or even with a lot of thinking. And it is that I know what the book is about. I have like some sort of revelation where I think it's actually about this. And then I just scrap it and start again. Usually, wrong place, wrong time went back 5 days in the first draft, and it was just about a kid who got involved with a gang, like totally different.
You all don't, wrong place, wrong time, which I wish I had right here to hold up, which is
I do have it, actually. I've got it here, of course, surrounded by it.
This book, you all, if you have not read this book, go, not right now after this is over, but go and get Wrong Place, Wrong Time and Just Another Missing Person. Completely different novels, completely different, but still with that Gillian McAllister voice and structure and reveals throughout, and this heartbreaking emotion of that you're really reading about real people. And we will talk about that more in a minute, but let me welcome you first to Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. If you don't know, A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us in a community, keep us reading, keep us discovering new books, keep us discovering new authors, and maybe connecting a little bit more with our already favorite authors. And we are still going strong here. And our author for today, let me tell you a little bit more about Gillian McAllister. She is the New York Times bestselling author of Reese's Book Club pick, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, which we have been raving over. Other great books that she has written: Everything But the Truth, The Choice, The Good Sister, The Evidence Against You, How to Disappear, and the Richard and Judy Book Club pick, That Night. She graduated with an English degree before working as a lawyer. Very interesting. She lives in Birmingham, England, where she now writes full-time. She is also the creator and co-host of the popular Honest Authors podcast. And you're back for another season, I saw?
Yes, we are. A bit slowly, but yes, we are.
I love seeing the joy of people realizing that you were all coming back. So as we welcome everyone here today, and let's talk about Wrong Place, Wrong Time and the difference of it later. But I do want to hear about that because it's so different. But let's talk about Just Another Missing Person right now. Just tell us about the plot at first, and then we can talk about what the book is really about.
Yeah, so here it is. Let me hold it up. Just Another Missing Person tells the story of Julia, who is the lead detective in charge of a missing person investigation. And on the first day of that case, she leaves the police station, walks to her car, and gets inside. And there's a man in the back wearing a balaclava. And he says, effectively, I know what you've done in your past, and you need to do everything I tell you on this case. And what she has done in her past is cover up a crime for her daughter, and therefore she is corruptible. And the idea came from, there's a very popular TV show here called Line of Duty, which is very different to what I write, but it's about bad cops and they get investigated for corruption. And I was watching it kind of thinking, I don't really write heroes and villains. I kind of write good people who do bad things
Mhm.
for understandable reasons, really. And I sort of thought, what would it take for a normal, straight up and down police officer to become corrupt? And I thought, well, some sort of threat against her family. And so that was where the idea was born.
I love Line of Duty. I'm addicted to Line of Duty. We watched every single season
Oh,
and every.
okay. I didn't realize it was kind of over there. Is it popular in America or is
I
it quite niche?
don't think so. I think it's pretty niche, and I don't think a lot
Uh,
of people have heard about it. But I will tell all of you crime timers, please look for Line of Duty. It is absolutely riveting and truly excellent. One of the things I love about this book also is that it starts with an impossible thing. The way the dominoes begin to fall when a woman walks into a dead end alley and is captured on CCTV. She walks into a dead end alley and does not come out. And you know Sophie Hannah, I'm sure, and she talks about how um, it's the best possible beginning of a novel is when something impossible happens because the reader is compelled to find out what happened.
mm,
How much
oh.
how much is that top of mind to you?
Yes, Sophie Hannah is very formative for me in the sort of high concept crime fiction world, and weirdly, she was the only person apart from my husband who knew I was pregnant, because we did an event together and I was just not on firing on all cylinders, and I told her at the bar afterwards, and we sat up late talking about it, and so she feels like my child's godparent or something. But yeah, I mean, I really wanted to write about a missing person, and I didn't just want to write a novel where somebody goes missing and they're either found or they're dead. And I actually said that to my dad, like, I don't want them to have run away and I don't want them to be dead. And that's an impossible conundrum, really. But I did solve that. She's not run away and she isn't dead. And because of that, that gave me the tools to create an impossible situation, knowing what I knew, which is all very cryptic, but it does give away the twist rather.
Well, I think what's so interesting about what you just said, and I want you all who are listening in the audience to realize how much Gillian just told you, how many you just told, and it doesn't matter. The book is still revealing and shocking and gasp worthy and life changing, even if you have all those cards that you know are in play. And I think, and again, the title is so perfect because this is not just another missing person, which
Uh,
was your total goal. Talk a little bit about the title and why that's so relevant.
yeah, exactly that, really. I didn't want to write a mainstream missing person novel, and I haven't. And that the title really tells you that. It hints at the fact that Julia, the cop, becomes corrupt over it. So it isn't just a normal investigation, but also it kind of hints at the reasons behind Olivia's disappearance and behind Julia's bribe are hidden for you in the title in some ways.
I think it's interesting because one of the things I love about your books and your writing, one of the many things, is that you understand your readers are smart and you understand, I think, your readers' expectations of they open a novel that's called Just Another Missing Person and they have all kinds of ideas of what that has to be in a certain way. And they're saying, okay, show me how this isn't going to be that. But they expect a certain thing. And you have this way of seeing the edges of a story and then focusing on the edges of the story and then making that be the story. Do you know what I
That's
mean?
really interesting. Yeah. So I suppose, do you mean the missing person investigation would really be central to a mainstream thriller, whereas actually mine is about a bribe?
Yes. And also about
Uh,
relationships and duty and morality and emotions and what we owe to each other and what it means to be good. What is good and what is doing
mm,
a bad thing for a good reason? Is that okay? All that is all that. It's not just another missing person story.
yeah, I do like to almost provoke the reader into kind of asking, really, this book, chapter 1, says you think that you'd never take a bribe, but okay, how about this situation? Perhaps you would. And that's kind of what I like to do.
I mean, I think it's a perfect book club book because the question that you ask, each reader would ask is, what would I do? What would I do in this
Uh,
situation? And
yeah, and
that,
I really like that kind of granular detail of like, okay, the guy's in your car and now he's left your car and you've agreed to take the bribe. Literally, what is the next thing you do? And then when you go home, do you tell your husband? Like, I don't like to skim over, because I think it's easy to kind of, I don't know, I read a lot of thrillers where the protagonist makes a choice to do something and then it seems quite easy. Whereas I sort of think it definitely wouldn't be. Like, you wouldn't go to sleep. You would agonize about whether to tell your family.
and you would still pretend in your professional life that everything was fine, that you were
Yeah.
going by the book. And even in this particular case, and I won't give anything away, she has to pretend that she is playing this by the rules, that she's being an investigator and going to the crime scene and looking for clues when really she might be doing something totally different. So it's this emotional juggle throughout that you manage to, I mean, how do you get into Julia's head so much, both as a personal person and as a professional person?
Um, I think, I mean, I do write character-led fiction, I think, and I do a full edit devoted to character. So once I know what they're going to do in the plot, I then I write down some characteristics that they've got to have. So Julia has to be loyal to her family, and she has to be straight as a die, really, to have the plot kind of work as it does. And once I know that, I then think, but who really is she? Like, what is her essence? And I heard on a writing podcast, I can't remember which one, that said, you know your character when you know how they would behave if a waiter spills water on them in a restaurant. And I love that because I always do know the answer if I know my character. And Julia would be thinking about work. She probably wouldn't even notice. That's the answer. And I like to be able to answer that for every character, even the Z characters whose name appears twice. I just think it's about, it's not thinking, what do I need the plot to do? It's thinking, what actually is this person going to do in this situation?
And but you do it so gorgeously. Talk a little bit more about that edit for character development. You go through with the filter of, is Julia, for instance, behaving the way Julia would behave, or how can I make her be more Julia?
Yeah, and like I think every sentence should show the character, and that's obviously a headache for an author. But is Julia going to notice the sky when she is in the briefing room talking to her team? Possibly not. What she actually notices is that it's so cold that a missing person might not survive the night. And that is the filter through which she notices the weather. And I do that with every single sentence. And it can get, the later in the book, I think the less that matters, because you've got to build the character early. And once your reader kind of believes in them, I think the prose, especially at the denouement where it's really fast paced, it can become more functional. But yeah, I do a character edit, and I just think a reader is so much more inclined to think, like I have a very bit part detective in my current work in progress, and he's got a few tattoos and he's interviewing my protagonist, and his phone rings and it's a rock anthem. And I just think that's a character. And I think you can put that in, or you can just have a normal cop interviewing. But readers find the latter or the former more fun, like where they're not just a cardboard cutout of a police officer. They are a real beating heart, even though they're on the page, for half an hour or whatever.
Well, it gives them a backstory and a life, even if we don't really know it. It lets us into who they are and how they might behave, and sort of what the rhythm, in the case of that, of the phone message, what the rhythm of their life, might be
Yeah,
happening
exactly.
outside of them. The thing that you do, though, with Julia and with all of the characters, and again, a book club sort of thing, is that even if we're thinking, oh, that's not a good decision, I'm not sure I would do that, you understand totally why they do it. And I think such a powerful tool that authors have, that you have, is that we completely understand the motivations of the characters.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And I think, I mean, there's no plot without some sketchy decisions, I think, but I like to get my characters to a point where perhaps 60% of the population would do the same thing. I don't want it to be a no-brainer, and I don't want it to be a real outlier of a decision, because I think anybody can write a thriller where people do crazy stuff. But I work hard to get the characters into a situation where they would make the bad decisions, which are often, planting evidence is a pretty shady thing to do. So the bar had to be pretty high for her to reach that.
Well, that's sort of where I'm going next. And I see that someone said, let me just see if I can find it again. When I look, Mia Clued Up Reader says, I call her the queen of the book club read because of the WWYD factor. What would you do factor? Which is so marvelous. And Margie Mano says, I'm also a fan of Line of Duty series, which is on BritBox. So that's amazing. Someone was saying, and I think I'm going to just go through and see if I can find it, and I can't. Somebody else will have to put it here, that it's a mother-daughter love story. I think it's a mother-daughter love story as well. And I remember, if this is not too much information, when it became clear that I wasn't going to have biological children of my own, my mother, who had 5 kids, said to me, it's fine with me if you don't have children, but there's an emotion that you will never experience if you don't.
Wow.
And I've thought of that for 35 years, and that's what you plumb so gorgeously in Just Another Missing Person. There's this relationship that is incomparable, unable to be duplicated by any other relationship. Do you think?
Well, it's very funny you should say that, because I wrote this without a child, and I now have one. And I was very interested in the parent-child relationship because I hadn't wanted to have children. I was 37 when I got pregnant. I'd put it off and put it off, and my husband was very keen, and eventually I obviously was. I made the decision to do it, but I actually think I have experienced all of the emotions that I feel for my son in my life. It's love. That's all it is. I don't know if that helps you 35 years after the event, because for sure there's a stronger element of protection, I think. But I definitely feel quite strongly that people without children have not missed out. It's just a love affair like any other.
It's a love affair like any other. That is wonderful and really memorable statement. Thank you. How did the relationship, though, between Julia and I wish I could tell my mom that. How did the relationship between Julia and her daughter emerge to you?
Well, interestingly, it was a son for a while, in the first draft. And I thought it would get compared to Wrong Place, Wrong Time, so I changed it. And it made the crime harder because I think women are far less, well, they definitely are, like far less likely to randomly commit a violent crime, really. And I think a court would have had more sympathy for Julia's daughter. So she had to do something quite a lot, beyond the pale. But yeah, that relationship actually really came in later drafts because I do think I have a son and it's a very uncomplicated relationship. I think I'm his favorite person and he's mine, and that's it. Whereas I think with mother-daughter, I do think it's an awful lot more complicated. And Julia and her daughter Genevieve do spar. And Julia doesn't always understand why Genevieve did what she did. And is living with the consequences of it. So I suppose it's a bit more thorny than some parental relationships I've written.
I do think that mothers see themselves in their daughters and sort of have a do-over of some kind, or realize that they're coming from their own experience and they recognize themselves and their daughters and they try to help them or guide them or force them to do something else.
Yes, I think that's definitely true. And I think there's a different expectation when it's not the same, when they're not the same gender as you for some reason. I don't know why that is, but like my son is actually very like me, I think. Like he's very communicative and I think he will be a big talker. Um, but I don't really compare myself to him or have any expectations of him, whereas I do think I would perhaps if he was a girl, which is interesting, isn't it?
It's probably a whole different book. It's probably a
Yeah.
whole, but this is great. And I love the idea of you just flipping the switch on the gender of the child, and it makes it a completely different story.
Yeah.
Probably a
Yeah.
more full story. In this particular case, we're talking about Just Another Missing Person by Gillian McAllister, which is absolutely not to be missed. Briefly on the police procedural aspect of it, how do you know how so much about how a police investigation works? And if you don't, you fooled me.
I do. I have a police officer who I had an hour with him, and I basically said, "Talk me through just like a missing person investigation," and he did that, and I gleaned enough of it to sort of pretend. But then, throughout the writing of it, I emailed him probably daily, but just saying like, tell me some weird stuff about like police, briefing rooms. And he'll be like, oh, they never get hoovered. They only hoover all of that kind of stuff. And like, oh, they really smell of cannabis because of all the weed we seize. And I just love that sort of detail and color. And that's the stuff that makes readers believe it, I think. So that is the stuff that I focus on, really. As long as you know the ranks and you know roughly how many detectives you need, you're away after that, I think.
Well, it's funny to be an American watching UK television about
Yeah,
police officers because it's completely different.
I bet it
We
is.
we are completely lost, and I just say whatever, it's fine. I'm sure I can figure it out
Yeah.
eventually. But the thing that I thought was equally impressive as the police procedural part of it was the emotional procedure of the police, how they think and what they need to know and how much leeway they have and what to expect of another officer. How good is someone else, how good a job is someone else going to do, and therefore what can you do um, uh, to get away with something. I'm being very
Yeah.
inarticulate here,
Yeah.
trying not to say something, but you understand your other police officer, your colleagues, so you know what you can do.
Yeah, and I think, what struck me the most talking to my police officer that helps me out is that they really live and breathe it. And the
Mm.
scene in chapter 1 when she's out for dinner and she's like, "Have I arrested the guy that's next to us?" Like that happens to them. And like the police officer I talk to regularly thinks, "Oh, I recognize him. Oh God, I hope he's not a criminal. I hope he's just like someone I went to college with." And I found it really interesting, the way that it is like a calling and a vocation, and the way that they live with the trauma of it in many ways. Like, our jobs are not saving lives. And, if I called him up now and said, what does a bullet wound to the head look like? He would be able to tell me. And that means he's witnessed it. And that's just his 9 to 5. I find it kind of mind blowing. And I really wanted to write about how full-bodied that is to be that. And that is why Julia is a workaholic, because I don't think there's any other way to do that job from what I kind of gathered.
You couldn't turn it off because everything is possibly something and anything could happen at any moment. And just as you talk about, anything could be connected to something else at any moment. And that would start another whole story. When you sit down at the computer or however you write, do you think, oh boy, I get to write now? Or do you think, okay, gonna do my words? What's your
it,
emotion, right?
it depends how it's going. At the moment, I'm about to deliver my next book, so I'm very happy to be doing it, very involved, don't really want to be taken away from it. All the characters are working, all the plot's working, and that's like 3 weeks of the whole year. The rest of the time it's trash, don't want to be there, don't know what I'm doing, never going to have a successful book again, etc. So yeah, it's a pretty I always say I kind of want to hold on to the book just a bit longer because it takes so long to get there, like to the point where your book's working, and then you have to send it off and start another one. Like, what kind of job is this?
That's when you get to the fun part. And you were saying,
Yeah.
I saw on social media, you were saying that something happened, and you were talking about this earlier this afternoon. Something happened and you get the book.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
does
And that happened very late for this one. Very late, scarily late. But I mean, I had a baby in October and I sent the book off in June. So, I mean, what was I thinking? But yeah, so I have done some edits, and actually they're basically a rewrite because my publisher sent quite heavy edits, and I read them, and I think it would have been easy for me to put sticking plasters over everything they talked about. But what I decided the edit letter really said was, this isn't quite working. And so I've decided to gut the book. So from the beginning of August to now, I deleted it and I've rewritten it, which I've now done 3 times for this book, which is by far my record. But yeah, I summed up the book in a line to myself, and I know what it's about now, and that sees you through once you know what your book's about. But for some reason it takes a year sometimes to figure that out for me.
And sometimes you think, this is not going to happen this time. I'm
Yeah,
never.
I really actually did this time, and it finally is working, and it actually feels a little bit like Wrong Place, Wrong Time to me now, this book that I'm working on. So in
As
that
big
kind
as
of
that
seamless
would be.
way. Yeah. So hopefully it's a good one.
Wow, my jaw is dropping. I mean, sometimes I think if the universe allows me to see the thing that the book is about, it's like dropping a drop of iodine into a glass of clear water, sort of. It just
Mm,
reshapes and reforms and recolors the whole book, and then
yeah.
everything in the book is about that, or you
Yeah.
can help it be about that.
Yeah, that is exactly it. And that is actually what happens to me with character as well. Like Julia's husband, I say of him that he is the last person using semicolons in text messages. And that is him. And when that happens, when you get their essence, and you know what kind of person that is from that, he's a pedant, he probably doesn't really have a lot of common sense, but he's just into grammar, And I think that you have to chase down that clarity, but it's very difficult because it sometimes just doesn't come for months and months and months, and you're alone with it. And are they this person, are they that, is it about this, is it about that? But eventually it does come.
I wonder, I don't think there's any writer that doesn't have the fear that this is the time they can't do it. But I'll
Yeah.
tell you that I have learned to embrace the panic at the moment when I think this is just not going to work. I think this has happened to you for 40 years, and
Yeah.
it always works. So that means after the panic comes the answer, and it always does. So you think, yay, I'm
Mm.
completely freaking out right now, because that means that something great will happen in a minute.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I
But
feel that. I have been struggling to plot out my next book, the one after the one I'm doing. And there's something more to that book, and I don't know what it is yet, but I hope it will come, because it has been several months of thinking while editing, and then thinking while not editing, and still it doesn't come. So I hope you're right.
you have to allow it. I think you have to allow it. I mean, sometimes I
Mm,
say, okay, anytime now, I've been patient.
yeah.
Thank you. Congratulations on this novel. Whatever you're
Thank
doing,
you.
something is working, and something is working gorgeously and life-changingly and quite specially. So I'm really honored that you're here today. I have been fangirling way too much about this, and forgive me.
Oh, thank you.
Really quite extraordinary, and all of your books are quite extraordinary. Oh, we promised we'd talk about Wrong Place, Wrong Time, and I
Yeah.
really, you were saying that if you haven't read it, you all, it goes back a day, backwards a day, backwards a day, backwards a day, and then backwards,
Mm,
and then backwards quite a while.
yeah.
Um, how did you decide to do that in
Well, sometimes I think with structures, I think you have to want to do it to have a cool structure, but you have to want the structure to serve what you're doing.
Mm.
And that was my moment of clarity with Wrong Place, Wrong Time. It was easy for me to think, okay, why did he stab someone? Okay, on day -1, the mum finds the knife. On day -2, she finds a text to gang, and he's started selling drugs or whatever. But then I thought, why am I telling it this way? Because I
Mm.
believe crime to have its inception in the past. And I thought I did want to write about the way she mothered him. But I was like, well, how can I go further back than even that? And then I thought, this book is actually not about the son at all. It's about something that way predates him. And I was thinking in a very sort of black and white way about how to stop a crime. You keep someone in the house or you stop them fraternizing with bad people. But actually, I think it became far more interesting when I thought outside of the box. And that was my revelation with that book. Like, why am I telling it backwards? And what can be gained from really going all into that structure, I think.
And I remember on the cover, doesn't it say, how do you stop a murder that's already happened?
Yeah, it does. Exactly.
That's the Sophie Hannah impossibility, which I love that you're pals with Sophie. She is just such a rock and such a genius. So please tell her hello. We have so many questions.
Oh, hit
Audience member,
me.
and so much adulation and so much adoration and so
Oh,
much um, admiration for your novels and your writing. We're talking about Just Another Missing Person by Gillian McAllister, which is just out. Let's pop up one of the questions before we give away a copy. So Renee is saying, welcome, Renee. Do the endings of your stories ever change from your outline? If so, did it with Just Another Missing Person?
yes, they do. Yeah, it's a very happy reading experience when they don't. There's a big twist in How to Disappear. The readers they just love that twist, and that never changed. But the journey to it definitely did. Yeah. Oh my God, Just Another Missing Person. The final draft, the first draft, sorry, was oh, it was totally different. So it still had that twist, but what happened in the second half was that Art, Julia's husband, found out who was bribing her and hired a hitman to kill him for her. And so it was really about the mistaken identity of the briber and the impact that had on the plot. And I had my revelation that was really like, okay, what is this about? This is about people that are missing and loved. And therefore, I have to find the missing people in the second half of the book. That's what I need to do, even though I still did resolve the Olivia plot halfway through, as I do now. But yeah, the second half changed absolutely completely.
That's an enormously different book altogether.
Yeah. I mean, I was with Lisa Jewell last weekend at Bloody Scotland, and we were talking about our output. And I said to her, how many words do you think you type for each 100,000 you publish? And she said 105,000. And she asked me, and I said 700,000 for every 100,000 I publish, which I honestly think that is accurate. So I'm a prolific, like I junk stuff. Like my agent says, I write like a screenwriter, like I throw stuff away and start from a completely different point, and
It
it's
isn't
very
a,
inefficient.
but it isn't a completely different point, is it? Really, it's not, because you've been through the other point and you have emerged and evolved
Yeah,
brain in a different place when you're writing the second time around. My
yeah.
initial manuscripts are generally 126. I know it's so funny to think 126,000 words, and I always cut them to
Wow.
95,000 words. And I know as I write them that that's going to happen. So sometimes I just
Wow.
say, oh, let's just see. This is going to go. This is going to go. I know this is going to go, but I need it to get there before I can take it out. So that's,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, sort of like you have to write your way into things.
and then I don't really need all that interstitial stuff. I just take it out. Anyway, let's take another question. That's an interesting question, Julie. How do you come up with your character names?
Yeah, I think try to have a mix, because I think if you read a book where they're called like Paul and James and Steve, you can kind of get confused because there's no kind of zing. But if they've all, like, I read a thriller recently where the characters all had outrageous names, and I found it quite jarring, because also it was never mentioned, like it wasn't part of it. It wasn't kind of a, a sort of, I don't know, elite kind of thing where they have like unusual names maybe, but it was just quite jarring. So I find a blend of unusual names that stay in your mind, with kind of normal names. But also I think in real life, like, people use nicknames so much, and I think, I think it's kind of worth, like, thinking of, like, one of my friends has a brother who's called George, but she just calls him Bubs, and I think that's, like, so common, and I kind of like to include things like that as well, because I think that's sort of quite, like, true to real life.
And that's why your characters come out as being very human, Art for Art Garfunkel, which is
Yeah.
funny on so many levels, but also memorable. It just works
Yeah. Well,
every
that's
way.
it. And when you meet somebody and they might say, "Oh, I was named after, whoever," you are more likely to remember their name, and that's an experience from real life that you can put onto the page, I think. And I try to do that. Like, I sometimes get told I'm hyper realistic, and I think it's a compliment, but that is what I kind of strive to do. Like, everybody knows in a group of men, they call each other Jonesy, and and I think I like to sort of emulate that in fiction, quite a lot. So yeah, names are important, I think.
Hyper realistic, meaning it's too much like real life. Wouldn't that be the?
I don't know. It was some review, and yeah, because it kind of is like, sometimes the dialogue meanders, because that is what happens, and yeah, I don't know whether it's a compliment or not really, but I take it as one.
Take it as one, absolutely. So for maybe two, it is a compliment, says Mia. Pamela Fry Priest says, hi, everyone. Let's take another question or two, maybe. Joe in the back. Do we have a couple more? I know we do. This is a great question. I was about to ask this myself, Renee. When did you know that you wanted to be a professional novelist? Did you write stories when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you'd have asked me age 5, 10, 15, I would have said novelist, and I sort of got proper jobs in the meantime because I didn't have any money and I needed to work, and I couldn't just leave university and write a novel and live off nothing. And yeah, I remember finishing a manuscript when I was about 12. So definitely, yeah, I've just always done it. It's just been a totally, like, normal and natural thing to me to write.
It's wonderful. I wish I had seen. Do you remember the very first thing you ever wrote? What it was?
Yeah, it was called Where Magic is Possible, and it was like a kind of fantasy, sort of quite high fantasy novel, like YA, I suppose, as well, because the characters were 12, so
You
funny.
still
I do, yeah, I do. I think it's somewhere in my house, because my dad gave it to me a few years ago. So yeah, I should, it's pretty badly written, but I should I should dig it out.
Isn't that lovely that he saved it?
Yeah, I know. It really is. It's nice. It was in his loft.
That's so nice. Okay, one last question, you all, and then we'll let Gillian go. One more question. Can you tell us what you're working on? Okay, and anything about it?
Oh, for sure. This manuscript is the love of my life. So I think it might be called Inside Story, but I haven't told anybody that yet. So they might all tell me that's not a good title. We'll see. So it is about a breaking news story that a woman watches. She's a literary agent, and she sees it on the television in the foyer of her office. And it says that a man has taken 3 hostages, and he's live streamed it on Facebook. And there are 3 hostages on the chairs with bags on their heads, and he's pacing back and forth with a gun. And then the police come into her office, just as she's thinking, God, how interesting. And they say, your husband's caught up in this. You need to come with us. And then they say, he's not a hostage. He's the one taking hostages. And it's about why he would do that, and about his very public criminal act, and about the intimacy of their marriage and what she believes that he's trying to tell her. So that's what it's about.
We're pre-ordering this right now. I'm going to my mailbox right now to wait for the manuscript, I have to say. So
Oh, I'll have to email it to you. Yeah, it's been a fun one because it's a real high wire act. Because why would anybody sane take 3 hostages? And there is an answer. But it's been so much fun because what it's about is that she believes him to be good, and she believes that it's almost part of her identity that he left for work as normal that morning. He said nothing. He kissed her on the lips and left, and an hour later was on Facebook, streaming this hostage scenario. And it's got a hostage negotiator who is sort of her antagonist because he wants to find out exactly what's going on. And all the while this siege rages on in a warehouse in London. And there's a line in it which is really what it's about, where she says, my husband's in there and I've got to ring him with a hostage negotiator, and this is my marital communication, but the police are listening in on it. And they do ring and he does answer, and the rest, you have to buy it.
You heard it here first. I love this. It is a brilliant idea. You have us all mesmerized by.
Oh, I'm glad. I've not pitched it before because it's just been in a little Word document on my computer.
Also, a literary agent, her whole life is story.
And he is her client. He's an author. And it's totally about that. It's about how she interprets him for a living, and she's interpreting everything he's left behind, notes and shopping lists and all sorts. And it's really about how well you know someone textually and otherwise.
You never cease to amaze us. You never do. I cannot wait to read this book. I urge you all to run in about 30 seconds when this is over and get Just Another Missing Person by Gillian McAllister. But one of you will not have to run and get it. One of you will win the giveaway that Gillian and her publisher are giving away a copy of this novel. Not this one. I am keeping this one, but another one. And Joe is choosing at random someone in the back room who will win this novel, and that is Margie Mano. Congratulations, you lucky woman. You will get Just Another Missing Person, and you'll get some information about how to contact me, to contact our producer, to contact Gillian's publisher, to get you, and it will finally get there. Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Your mad success. Before you go, let me just tell you, all of you, and thank you so much for coming. Deborah is here. That is so wonderful. And thank you. And Randy, so nice to see you all. Maria, Alicia, and Sharon Bishop. That is, people are saying, I want this book. Definite pre-order, says Lynn.
Oh, it may not even be on Amazon yet, but
we're setting on go. In about 15 minutes, you all, we will talk to the fantastic Jess Lowry, who's brand new, really chilling, really scary, really atmospheric. The Taken ones you will not want to miss. So get a cup of tea or get a cup of coffee or lemonade or whatever you like at this time of day. Maybe wine if you're in the UK, as Gillian is, and join us in about 15 minutes. And then next Tuesday, if you can't do that, next Tuesday, we are talking to Emily Critchley. Look at that really lovely cover, One Puzzling Afternoon. And guess what I'm reading next is this. So many wonderful authors and so many wonderful books right here for you on Primetime. Gillian, again, thank you for being here today. And we will see you all next time. Remember, it is always safe inside a book, and we will see you soon.